Russia works like this. They always have the first story. It's always bullshit, but they always have the first story. For the Skripali poisoning, they had 28 different stories. In general, number of arguments matter more than their quality because they want to swarm you. 61% of foreign influence efforts are conducted by Russia. In Europe, over 80%. It's just to overwhelm you. The truth doesn't matter. It's completely asymmetrical because they can always lie, and we have to rely on fact-checking.
In March of 2024, we organized an event on Russia's hybrid war in the West. At this sold-out event, we discussed with experts from intelligence, journalism and academia on topics such as disinformation, election interference and espionage. During the event, I gave a talk on Russian online disinformation and propaganda, which I wanted to share to online audiences too. Hope you enjoy it.
I want to welcome Pekka Kallioniemi, all the way from Finland. Please give him a warm welcome. And Pekka is a Finnish researcher of disinformation and hybrid warfare, and he publishes the popular Vatnik Soup series on X, former Twitter, where he exposes the strategies of Russian propagandists. And he has a book upcoming called Vatnik Soup, The Ultimate Guide to Russian Disinformation. And we're going to listen to a short presentation. Thank you.
All right. It's good to be here. I think I should have, there they are. So, yeah, so the topic of my speech today, disinformation and propaganda on social media. I will heavily focus, or solely focus on Russian version of this for reasons that I explain soon. But first, let's take a briefly look at the terminology. So what are information operations? Organized activity where one party attempts to affect the public opinion and behavior of individuals and policymakers, which then affect the society or a community as a whole. That's basically, it comes from academia, it's very official, but it's basically, if you think of disinformation campaign, it's a smaller thing, but information operations it's much bigger. It can span over decades, and it has a very long-term goals, and would be like 25 years of information operations to actually have an effect. And effective information operations, they have a polarizing effect on the society or a community. I will elaborate on this in a bit. And as I said, they are long-term activities, so there are no, it's not like a quick brainwashing procedure that you do, but you see the effects years after the initiation of the actual operation. And today, a lot of these operations rely heavily on the internet and especially on social media. So this is probably the biggest channel where they are being conducted right now. And then briefly about disinformation, because we often talk about disinformation, misinformation. You sometimes see these being used in the same context. So what is in academic terms, it's intentionally misleading information. So you know that the message that you are spreading or telling, it's bullshit, but you still share it. So just an example here, it's often like a half-truth, and then you combine it with a lie. So this is, so there are biolabs in Ukraine. Some of you may remember this from the first days of the full-scale war in February 2022. And then TASS reported that the Ukrainians are actually developing weapons with support from the US in these biolabs, and then they became these bioweapons labs. And this narrative was also spread, people like Tucker Carlson, for example, in the United States. And then you can even take it further. You can say that these weapons include combat insects that allegedly will be used to infect Russian troops with hazardous contagious diseases. So, for example, there was a story in Russia that Ukrainians are creating a bioweapon that will affect pregnant Russian women so that they miscarry. So this kind of stories, but in Russia they become reality through this. TASS is a very official state Kremlin-controlled media site. So, and they are spreading this kind of narrative. So but yeah, that's disinformation. Russians also utilize a strategy that is called the fire hose of falsehood. And this term was coined by a Rand paper from, I think, 2016. But the characteristics of this strategy is it's high volume and multi-channel approach. A lot of messages on all possible platforms. So Facebook, TikTok, Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, like every possible social media platform are being used for this. There's no kind of, they're absolutely always willing to tell lies. There is no commitment for consistency. You can kind of conflict. There can be conflicting messages, and it's actually better if they are conflicting each other. And the point is not to persuade or kind of brainwash people, but to confuse and overwhelm, and also entertain. So it's often very entertaining content. And this kind of strategy, it assumes a low trust environment, and it lowers it further. So in countries where people don't trust politicians, policymakers, the police, journalists, this strategy works extremely well. And this is important in a later stage of my speech. I will get back to this. But in general, number of arguments matter more than their quality, because they want to swarm you. They want to drown out any competing message that is coming from, like, fact-checking or whatever. Is that it's just the volume that you basically use to confuse and polarize and overwhelm people. And about the scope of Russian operations, 61% of foreign influence efforts are conducted by Russia. This is a statistic from 2023. In Europe, this is from 2018, so it's a bit old, but over 80% is coming from Russia. So that's the scale of it. So it's almost impossible to comprehend. You still think of countries like China are also doing a lot of information operations, but still Russia is dominating this information space with their operations. With the 2020 US presidential election, troll farms reached 140 million Americans a month on Facebook, just on Facebook. And it's basically, these days, the focus is not anymore on Europe or North America, but Africa, for example. There's a lot of information operations going on in various African countries, Latin America. So those are the big hotspots right now, and they're also the blind spots for most. And as I said, one of the main goals is to polarize communities, to kind of turn them to fight each other. And this is often done by provoking conversations around big, controversial topics that invoke strong emotions. COVID-19 vaccines, Black Lives Matter, in the Netherlands, farmer protests. There's a lot of different topics that can be used to polarize societies or communities. And Russians are very good at utilizing this strategy of polarization. Because if you think about it, divided society is always weaker than something that's unified. So they always try to put a wedge between different parties in societies and in countries, so to kind of create this further polarization inside it. And why do they use social media? Social media platforms are an integral part of our lives. We find love, we find work, we decide who we vote, we give a lot of power to algorithms and social media sites. And I mean, all these companies, they also have a massive amount of information and data on us, so they can make very sophisticated estimates on our emotions, our desires, our dislikes, so they can give us endless amount of content that we will enjoy. We will be fully engaged in these social media websites because they are so good at predicting what we enjoy. And that's also the process that takes us to so-called rabbit holes of, for example, conspiracy theories or radicalization or etc. And in general, social media, it increases our emotions. So these kind of primitive emotional reactions of rage and hate and I mean, strong emotional reactions are very common in social media, but what it lacks is what I call soul. So there is no, for example, here I'm talking to you, we have this nonverbal communication. I can look at people, I can look at you, and we have this soul involved in the communication. But once you go online, it's a bit more colder environment in that sense. So these primitive emotions are dominating our kind of interaction online. Also, it's a very manipulated space. You cannot see the text below, but this is something that you can buy for 10 euros for online. So if you want to become a popular on Instagram, 24,000 likes. I don't know how many of you have Instagram or photos where you have 24,000 likes, but just spend 10 euros and you will have it. And you can buy manipulation on any platform. It's possible, and it's still very much, it's a huge business. And this is, of course, done also on a national level. Like troll farms, bot farms, they are still a reality, and they are very active. And these platforms are basically, they cannot do much about it because it's just such a massive problem. And then when we talk about Russia, whenever there's a big event, be the first one to set the agenda. Russia works like this. They always have the first story. It's always bullshit, but they always have the first story. So here, the left image is after MH17. Russians published a photo, photoshopped image of a Ukrainian fighter jet shooting down MH17. Then they came up with, okay, it was actually filled with corpses. There were no living people in the plane. And I mean, they came up really fast with these stories. Nord Stream, they were the first one to put out the big story probably through Seymour Hersh. There are a lot of evidence suggesting that Seymour Hersh, a journalist, is getting information through a Russian operative. Of course, Mariupol theater bombing, they came up quickly with the story that there was a bomb inside and it was triggered, even though they bombed. If you don't know the story, it says children on the pavement, then a lot of people died when Russia actually bombed the theater. But yeah, first story always comes from Russia, and it's always bullshit. For the Skripal poisoning, they had, I think, 28 different stories. So it's just to overwhelm you. The truth doesn't matter. It's completely asymmetrical because they can always lie, and we have to rely on fact-checking and investigations. And if you think about how long did it take for the investigation of MH17, it took years, and Russia had already set many, many stories and agendas. So they're always the first one to set the agenda. And then the Netherlands, what's been going on here? If we talk about hybrid warfare, 2013, you had the Russian spy Raymond Poudret jailed here. I think it was 2009 when he was giving out documents to Russians. Of course, political influencing. Geert Wilders already in 2014 was saying that anti-democratic forces, Jew haters and National Socialists are at Maidan when there was the Revolution of Dignity. And legitimizing the Kremlin, going to Russia as an election observer or something like this. It's also a way to kind of, it's a hybrid warfare strategy. Of course, Bonanza Media. Then we already talked, there was a talk about sending sanctioned technology to Russia to fuel their war machine. And then a Russian campaign with 50,000 fake accounts that sent 1 million messages in an attempt to undermine support for Ukraine in Germany. 2024. I mean, there are a lot of these examples. This is just a few, but I mean, they are very active probably today. I don't know if maybe 2 or 3 GRU agents are here, but yeah, probably, yeah. But I mean, hi. Okay, then what's the solution? Okay, there's a lot of stuff, a lot of gloomy stuff. I'm going to talk about Finland. Finnish people are not very good at saying nice things about their country, but I will do it now because we are very good at this. We start teaching media literacy at a very early age, preschool already. So what are the consequences of lying, how it affects communities and so on, and it goes throughout the whole school system. So these media literacy, critical thinking, they are included in the curriculum. We have a very free press. I think it's the most free in the world, number one. They are free to criticize decision-making, politics. There's also, on the national level, there's a multi-channel approach. So, for example, Finnish broadcasting company is very active on social media, also TikTok, all this, all social media platforms, basically. And there's also quite a lot of research on future of disinformation and future of journalism. So how AI will, for example, change, what's happening in our society, how it can lower trust in general, basically to everything. And the goal is to increase trust in society and to its authorities and decision makers. So as I said before, the firehose of falsehood works in a low trust environment. In Finland, we try to kind of increase this trust so that people actually trust journalists and politicians, and they are held accountable for what they do. And then there's also the matter of security of information. So if there is actual war, how can we make sure that the information that, for example, policymakers are receiving, that it's not influenced by a foreign agent, for example? But yeah, this is a small part of from a Guardian article about how Finland starts fighting fake news. It's quite old, but still, it's a good article if you want to take a look at this. And this is in Finnish, but it basically tells you how people trust. This is the up there in the red box is a Finnish broadcasting company. So basically the biggest relay conveyor of news. So 85% trusted. Yellow press at the bottom with 26 and 30. But still, like in general, there's a high trust to media in Finland. This is, so Finland applied for NATO membership, I think in May 2022, I may be mistaken. This is anti-NATO demonstration. It's 7 people plus the guy who took the photo. And that's basically, we had a lot of big demonstrations for COVID, during COVID time, like over 10,000 people. Then the full-scale invasion started, and now it's this. So there's something changed. People kind of realize that something is going on, and I mean, I'm kind of happy about this picture when I look at it. It's a good picture. But for the future, there's a lot of stuff we have to worry about the future. I hope this video works, but let's.
This is a PSA. You can't believe anything you see these days. These glasses aren't even real. Neither is my face. All this stuff was 3D tracked on using these dots that I drew on with this marker. Actually, the marker isn't real either. Neither is the background, or my face. Have a good night.
So AI will change everything. It's going to be a big game changer. That's another topic. Maybe in a few months we'll do it here in the Balie. But that concludes my presentation. Thank you.